boy. Did you guys happen to catch Rebel Moon? Came out the weekend of Christmas. Did you catch Rebel Moon? Man, that was the talk of Twitter for the better part of, what, 3 or 4 days? Really, that's what it lasts, about 3 or 4 days on Twitter. And the Snyder cultists, the Snyder bros, they ate it up. Oh man, it made #1 for the first weekend. People loved talking about it. And I didn't have the chance. I wasn't feeling well, holidays, everything. I didn't have a chance to sit down and review it. I did put a review up on my Letterboxd. Make sure you go check that out. But I tell you what, I sat there, I watched that movie. We're going to do a quick recap here of what I thought. Look, the movie was not good. I was disappointed because I know Zack Snyder is a good filmmaker. Man of Steel was fantastic. I like BVS. Justice League was good. Army of the Dead was all right. But this was just not it. This was just not it for him. From bad acting, bad writing, bad story, bad action, terrible camera, to bad the score, Junkie XL. What happened, man? It was bad. This movie was not good. And you can't tell a Snyder bro that, obviously. They just didn't understand. And obviously Netflix, people have Netflix. People, Netflix is what, $17.99 a month now. So a lot of people have Netflix. People have had Netflix for a number of years at this point. I mean, it's what people have. People have streaming services. So it came out on a weekend when really the only competition was Aquaman 2, which shockingly made some pretty decent money. But then again, the DCEU is dead. So who is it going against? A free movie against a dead universe. When you really start to think about it, you start to see, yeah, it's essentially a free movie. So when it started to hit #1 in all these countries on Netflix, Snyder Bros were like, holy crap, it's #1. Oh my goodness, it's #1. Woo, yeah, we're #1, yeah. Well, people were freaking out. You can't tell them that, just because it's #1 the first weekend. Look, The Marvels was #1 their first weekend. These movies, their first weekend, even if they're terrible, hit #1 on multiple occasions. It happens because it's the excitement of something new. That's if I'm not mistaken, 2017's Justice League was #1 that weekend that it came out. It happens. And you can never take that first weekend and say, this is a big movie. This is a good movie. You can't take that first weekend. You have to look at the longevity of its success, of its run. And I've even said, like, look, if it can hold, top 4, top 5 for a couple weeks, I could see it, okay, and agree, it's a success. But the thing that we started to notice is it started to drop. It started to drop over the last few days. And, after a week, it stayed in the top 10. I give it credit after a week. But here we are. After a week, we're 14 days at this point, and it's at number 10 now in the United States. It's number 10 on Netflix, and it's going to drop from there. We know that. It's going to be impossible for this movie to do anything more than that. Maybe it'll shoot back up for a couple days, or maybe to 6, 7, but it's going to fall back out. It's going to be like that for a while. This movie's not good. It's not. And it's again, like I said, it's disappointing. It's upsetting because I know Zack Snyder is a better director, filmmaker than this. But they let him run too rampant with this movie. There's a lot of people who just won't accept that. I saw some Snyder bros actually come out and say, it's not a good movie. But once they started to have their Snyder cards revoked, once they started to see their Snyder brethren come at them and say, what are you doing, man? Don't do that. Hey, you can't do that. You can't do that. Once that started to happen, they were like, oh, I watched it again, and man, second viewing, so much better. And it's like, come on, guys, we know this game you're playing. We know what you're trying to do. You're trying to just pump this up. It is okay for a filmmaker to have a bad movie. Spielberg's had bad movies. Cameron has had bad movies. Scorsese's had bad movies. Tarantino's had bad movies. It's what happens. Again, film is all subjective. Maybe you don't think Tarantino hasn't had a bad movie. Maybe you don't think Spielberg's had a bad movie. The film is subjective. Okay, I get that. I understand that. But to a certain extent, to a certain point, at a certain time, you start to realize that, this movie just isn't good. It just is not good. And this is one of those cases. I started to realize with Zack is when he's able to work with an established IP that has a world already built that he can kind of play in that sandbox, those films typically do better, have more success than the worlds that he builds on his own. You take a look at Dawn of the Dead, you take a look at Man of Steel through BVS Justice League, even the Owl movie. Watchmen, those are all established IPs, 300, established IPs that have a built universe that he had moderate success or had some good moments in those films. But then you have Sucker Punch, you have Army of the Dead, you have now Rebel Moon. Sucker Punch is it's almost an impossible watch. It really is. Army of the Dead, it wasn't terrible. But I don't hear even the Snyder Bros sitting there talking about wanting to watch it again. And don't let them fool you. They know it's not a great movie. It's an okay movie, but it's not one of those movies that, hey, did you see Army of the Dead? And Rebel Moon is right there with it. And honestly, if Sucker Punch wasn't so bad, this would be his worst movie. Sucker Punch is right above it. I don't know. This movie dropped. I think people need to realize that Zack Snyder isn't this all amazing, perfect director. He has a lane that he needs to stay in. Maybe this deal at Netflix that he has is maybe a blessing in disguise that will prove to the fans and even to the studios that, hey, we now know what and who Zack is. We understand what he can and cannot do. If Zack wants to agree to that, if Zack wants to fall in line with that, we'll work with him. But if not, then we're going to back off and not work with him. And maybe he'll find some low-budget studios that'll work with him at that time. I can tell you this. Rebel Moon Part 2 will not do as well as Rebel Moon Part 1 did. I can tell you the director's cut of Rebel Moon Part 1 is not going to be better or make Rebel Moon Part 1 better. It's not, because the problems with this movie aren't to be fixed by a longer runtime, more blood, or swearing or boobs or anything like that we're going to see in an R-rated cut. It's that simple. So it's going to be interesting to see how Netflix handles this, because his deal is up in, a year, I think? Next year, I think his deal is up. Are they going to extend him? Are they going to keep going? Or is he going to go and ride off into the sunset and be, hey, I made my 7 or 8 movies, I'm done? It'll be interesting to see what happens, for sure. But let me know your thoughts on Rebel Moon. What did you think of everything? I like I said, it wasn't for me. It didn't land for me. Will I see Part 2? Maybe. It's not going to be one that I run to. But it'll be interesting. Let me know your thoughts. Make sure you hit that like button, hit subscribe. With all that said, I'll catch you all later.